The sun blazed over the small, isolated town nestled deep in the heart of Kenya. It was a place unlike any other, where the roads were always clean, the houses looked perfect, and life seemed almost too good to be true. Lucas and Sophia were one of the many couples living in this seemingly ideal neighborhood. They had everything they could ever want: an expensive car, a beautiful home, and a dinner table always filled with the finest meals. Lucas worked every day in the vast savannah beyond town, while Sophia, like the other women, stayed home, ensuring everything was perfect when their husbands returned. The women never asked questions about their husbands' work. They only knew one thing: it was part of a top-secret project called Victory. No one dared to ask more. There were only 2 rules in this town: never ask unnecessary questions and never enter the savannah beyond the town. The elders warned that leaving the town was dangerous. Some even believed it was a matter of life and death. Life in the town was predictable. Sophia spent her days shopping in high-end boutiques with her friends, Bunny and Peg, or attending dance classes. They had once been friends with another housewife, but she had changed after breaking the rules. Her name was Margaret, and she had done the unthinkable: taken her son beyond the town's borders. The boy never came back. The town said it was her punishment for curiosity, and soon after, she began behaving strangely, talking about things that made no sense. People avoided her, but Sophia couldn't forget her. One evening, Frank and his wife Shelley hosted a grand party at their mansion. Frank was the most powerful man in town, the one every man worked for. The drinks flowed, laughter filled the air, and everyone seemed happy. But then, Margaret appeared. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "We don't belong here," she said, her voice shaking. For a brief moment, silence fell over the party. Then, people chuckled awkwardly, brushing her words aside. But Sophia felt a chill down her spine. What did she mean? That night, Margaret's husband dragged her away. Nobody saw her again after that. Days passed, but Sophia couldn't shake the uneasy feeling Margaret's words had left behind. Then, one afternoon, while riding the town tram, she noticed something strange: a plane flying low overhead. Then, it happened. The plane spiraled out of control and crashed into the distant hills beyond the town. Sophia's heart pounded. It was forbidden to go there, but what if someone needed help? Ignoring the warnings, she ran toward the wreckage. The further she went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no wind, just an eerie silence. When she reached the crash site, there was no plane, no debris, nothing. Instead, she found a strange dome-shaped building hidden among the hills. A cold fear gripped her, but curiosity pushed her forward. She placed her hand against the glass-like surface. A shock of images rushed through her mind, visions, memories that weren't hers. She gasped, stumbling back. Something was terribly wrong with this town. And now, she needed to find out the truth. When Sophia opened her eyes, she was in her own bed. Her head pounded, her body felt weak, and her memories were jumbled. The last thing she remembered was touching the glass-like surface of that strange dome in the hills. But now, she was back home, as if nothing had happened. From the kitchen, she heard the sound of a knife chopping against a wooden board. That was strange. Lucas never came home early. She slowly sat up and called out, "Lucas." He appeared in the doorway, looking perfectly normal, dressed in his usual work clothes. "You're awake," he said with a smile. "You were sleeping when I got home." Sophia frowned. "Sleeping? No, I was in the hills. There was a plane crash. I saw." Lucas sighed and shook his head. "Sophia, you didn't go anywhere." "But I did," she insisted. "I saw something out there. A building. And then, I don't remember what happened next." Lucas put his hands on her shoulders. "You were here the whole time." His voice was calm, reassuring, but something about it felt off. She studied his face. He wasn't worried. He wasn't confused. He was acting like she was making things up. "Lucas," she whispered, "I think something is wrong with this town." He exhaled sharply and let go of her. "Sophia, you're just exhausted. Maybe you had a bad dream. Get some rest." She wanted to argue, but a deep sense of unease crept up her spine. Why was he so certain she hadn't left the house? In the following days, Sophia's world started to crumble. She would see things that weren't there, shadows moving at the edge of her vision, voices whispering when no one was around. At night, she would wake up gasping for air, feeling like she was suffocating. At ballet class, the paranoia reached a breaking point. She stood in front of the large mirror, stretching, when suddenly, she saw Margaret's reflection. Not just her reflection, her death. In the mirror, Margaret stood on the roof of her house, looking down, her face twisted in despair. Then, she jumped. Sophia screamed. The other women turned to her in shock. "Sophia, what's wrong?" Bunny asked, rushing to her side. Sophia's hands trembled. "Margaret, she's going to." A distant thud rang out. The women turned to the window. A crowd was already forming in front of Margaret's house. Sophia ran. By the time she reached the house, it was too late. Margaret's body lay still on the ground. The men in red uniforms had already arrived. They moved fast, gathering the body, cleaning up the scene, making sure no one got too close. Sophia wasn't even allowed to mourn. Before she could react, one of them grabbed her arm and pulled her away. "Go home, ma'am. This doesn't concern you." That evening, Sophia sat in the living room, waiting for Lucas to return. Her mind raced with thoughts, memories, and an overwhelming sense of dread. When Lucas finally walked through the door, she wasted no time. "Margaret is dead," she said. "She didn't just fall. She knew something. Just like me." Lucas sighed, rubbing his temples. "Sophia, please. No, listen to me," she snapped. "First, the plane crash, and now Margaret. Something is happening here, and we're all just pretending it's fine." Lucas kneeled beside her. "Sophia, I love you. But you need to stop this. Margaret had been struggling for a long time. It was an accident." "No, it wasn't," she whispered. "I saw it happen before it even happened." His face tensed. For a second, he looked at her the way one would look at a broken thing. Before she could say anything else, there was a knock at the door. Dr. Collins, Frank's trusted doctor, had arrived. Lucas stood and let him in. "Sophia's been having some trouble lately," he said. Sophia clenched her fists. So he really thought she was crazy. Dr. Collins sat down across from her and gave her a polite smile. "You've been under a lot of stress, Sophia. You're not sleeping well. Maybe a mild sedative will help." Her hands trembled as she watched him reach into his bag. That's when she saw it. A document labeled, "Security Threat." Her name was on it. Panic shot through her. They were watching her. They saw her as a problem. She needed to find out why. The next evening, the entire town gathered for a grand celebration victory night. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but for Sophia, it felt like a nightmare. As she stood among the glittering decorations and laughing guests, all she could see were lies. She tugged at Lucas's sleeve. "Let's go home." Lucas barely looked at her. "Sophia, not now. This is important." Frank was making him his partner. Sophia could barely breathe. She felt like a prisoner in a golden cage. She turned and rushed to the ladies' room, locking the door behind her. Moments later, Bunny walked in. "Sophia, what's going on with you?" Sophia hesitated. Bunny was her friend. Maybe just maybe she could trust her. Taking a deep breath, she whispered, "Bunny, I think something is very wrong with this town. I saw something in the hills. Margaret knew something, and now she's dead." Bunny's face darkened. "Sophia, stop. Whatever you think you saw, forget about it." "Forget? How can I?" Bunny grabbed her hands. "Listen to me." Her voice was urgent. "I like you. You're my friend. But if you keep talking like this, they will come for you, too." Sophia's heart pounded. "Who?" Bunny shook her head. "Just drop it. Act normal, please." Sophia stared at her friend, realization sinking in. Bunny was afraid, and that meant one thing. Sophia wasn't crazy. She was in danger. Sophia knew she had little time. She needed a plan, a way out. But first, she had to uncover the truth. That night, while Lucas slept, she quietly slipped out of bed and made her way to his office. She had to find that document. Her hands shook as she rummaged through his drawers. Finally, she found it, the one labeled security threat. She flipped it open and gasped. It wasn't just about her. It was about the entire town. And if what was written in those papers was true, then none of this was real. A few days later, Lucas and Sophia invited their neighbors over for dinner. The guests included Bunny, Frank, and his wife, Shelley. The air buzzed with laughter and conversation, the smell of grilled meat filling the house. Sophia moved between the kitchen and the dining area, forcing a smile, pretending everything was fine. But inside, she was waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. While Lucas entertained the guests, Frank slipped into the kitchen. Sophia stiffened as he leaned against the counter, watching her with a smirk. "You've been busy, Sophia," he said casually, swirling his drink. "Asking the wrong questions, poking around where you shouldn't." Sophia's heartbeat quickened. "And what if I have?" Frank chuckled. "Then you already know the truth, don't you? You just don't understand it yet." Sophia's hands clenched around the serving spoon. "Tell me, then." Frank stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're right. Something is off about this town. But the real question is, what are you going to do about it?" Sophia stared at him. He wasn't denying it. He was teasing her, as if daring her to figure it out. She turned sharply, carrying the food to the table. If Frank thought she was going to stay quiet, he was wrong. As everyone sat down to eat, Sophia cleared her throat. "I have a question," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "How did you all meet your husbands or wives?" Bunny raised an eyebrow. "What kind of question is that?" Sophia smiled. "Just curious." One by one, the couples shared their stories. The more they spoke, the more Sophia's stomach twisted. Every couple had the same story. They had all met in similar ways. Honeymooned in the same locations. Some were even born in the same cities. Sophia's hands trembled. It wasn't a coincidence. It was designed. She turned to Lucas, who was glaring at her, silently warning her to stop talking. But she couldn't. "Don't you all see?" she said urgently. "Something is wrong here. Our memories, our lives, they don't make sense." Silence. Then a few chuckles. "Sophia, you sound just like Margaret," Shelley said with a smirk. Sophia's blood ran cold. Margaret had said the same thing. And now Margaret was dead. No one believed her. Not even Bunny. As the guests said their goodbyes, Sophia pulled Lucas aside, desperation in her voice. "I can't stay here. Please, let's leave this place together." Lucas hesitated. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." Sophia felt tears of relief sting her eyes. She rushed to pack a bag, her hands shaking with urgency. But the moment they got into the car, she knew. Lucas had no intention of leaving. She barely had time to react before the men in red suits appeared, dragging her out of the car as Lucas watched. He didn't fight for her. He didn't stop them. He had betrayed her. Sophia's world turned into darkness. She woke up strapped to a hospital bed, a blinding light above her. "Doctor." Collins stood over her, holding a metal device. "You're very stubborn, Sophia," he said. Then, pain, electricity surged through her body. Memories ripped apart. Her mind burned as she saw flashes of another life, her real life. She was never a housewife. She was a surgeon. A brilliant, overworked woman who barely had time to breathe. She had spent years saving lives, working long hours, pushing herself to exhaustion. And Lucas. He had been unemployed. He had resented her success. And now, she knew the horrifying truth. Project Victory was a simulation. When she woke again, she was back in her house. Lucas sat beside her, stroking her hair gently. "You're okay now," he whispered. Sophia blinked, her mind foggy, her body weak. "What happened?" Lucas smiled. "You had a breakdown, but it's all fine now. You're safe." Safe. Sophia felt like screaming. She remembered everything. Lucas had forced her into this. He had stolen her real life, trapping her in a fake world where she was nothing more than his obedient wife. Frank had created this place. The men had chosen to live here. And the wives. They were prisoners. Their real bodies lay somewhere else, trapped in a coma, while their minds lived in this perfect illusion. Sophia sat up slowly. Lucas watched her carefully. "Are you okay?" he asked. She forced a small smile. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm okay." But inside, she was planning. She had to get out. And this time, she wouldn't fail. Sophia's heart pounded as Lucas held her tightly, his arms locking her in place. His voice was desperate, pleading. "You don't understand, Sophia. This is our life, our perfect life. Why would you throw it away?" Her mind raced. She had to get out. Her fingers wrapped around the heavy glass on the bedside table. Without hesitating, she swung it hard. Smash! The glass shattered against Lucas's head. He gasped, his grip loosening as he staggered backward. Then, he collapsed. Blood pooled around his head, his body motionless. Sophia stood frozen, breathing heavily. Had she, before she could process it, a loud alarm blared through the house. They knew. Now or never. Bunny burst through the door, her eyes wild with urgency. "Sophia, run!" Sophia blinked at her in shock. "You knew." Bunny nodded. "I've always known. But I chose to stay." Her voice cracked. "My children are here, Sophia. I lost them in the real world. Here, I can still hold them." Sophia's chest tightened. "But it's not real, Bunny." Bunny swallowed hard. "I know, but it's real enough for me." She grabbed Sophia's arms. "Listen to me, Lucas is dead. That means he's dead in the real world too. No one can pull you out now. You have to get out on your own." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She was alone in this now. "They'll come for you," Bunny warned. "Go, get to the mountain." Sophia didn't hesitate. She bolted. She ran through the streets, her bloody dress sticking to her skin. People stared. The men, those who had controlled this world, looked panicked. The women, those who had been trapped, looked confused. Something inside them shifted, and then chaos. The town fell apart as Sophia jumped into Lucas's car, slamming her foot on the gas. Headlights flashed behind her. They were chasing her. She had to make it. Dust kicked up as she sped toward the mountain, the dome-shaped building looming at the top. Faster, faster. A black car swerved in front of her, blocking the road. Sophia gritted her teeth. Not today. She yanked the wheel, veering off-road, speeding up the rocky hill. The tires skidded, the engine roared, and then, she was there. Sophia stumbled out of the car, gasping for breath. The wind howled around her. A figure appeared in the dust. Lucas. But it wasn't possible. He was dead. His voice was soft, pleading. "Sophia, please, don't go. ND the wives." She blinked. His face was exactly the same, too perfect. This wasn't Lucas. It was the illusion of him. She took a step forward, reaching out. Her fingers touched the glass. A deep hum vibrated through the air. The simulation glitched. Then everything went white. Sophia gasped awake, her body jerking violently. She was lying on a real bed. In a real room. Her throat was dry. Her limbs ached. She turned her head and saw machines' wires connected to her body. Then she saw him. Lucas's lifeless body was strapped to the bed beside hers, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. He was truly gone. Her chest rose and fell in shaky breaths. She was free, but as she sat up, her legs weak beneath her, a question echoed in her mind. How many others were still trapped? And worse, how many would never escape? With trembling hands, she pulled the wires from her skin. She had survived. Now, she had to end it. For everyone. Sophia stood by the window, her hands gripping the cold metal frame. The city outside was alive, real, messy, imperfect, but free. She had won. But the battle wasn't over. She glanced back at the machines behind her, the ones still keeping others trapped in the illusion. How many more women were lying there, dreaming of a false paradise while their real lives faded away? She took a deep breath. She had escaped. Now, she would bring them all back. As she stepped out into the world, the morning sun kissed her skin. The sky stretched endlessly above her, no longer a digital trick, but something real. A new beginning. A second chance. For herself. For them all. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more thrilling stories. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Bye.